Now, before we get started here, some of you may not know much about our software platform. I'll just be very brief. We are a customer success platform. We like to say that we manage everything from new to renew so that you can have a healthy customer base, grow that customer base, get the real-time data, insights, integration into key system of record like CRM to help your customer success strategy grow and help those customers retain better and upsell better. So if you don't know much about us, would encourage you to reach out. We'd love to have a chat with you and discuss how we can help your customer success strategy here in 2024. Without further ado, let me introduce Kari Ardalan here. Kari will take over here briefly, but speaking on a topic that all of us are hearing, all of us are probably talking about with our leadership teams, with our teams. How do we unlock digital success? How do we pair that with a, maybe more of a high touch motion as well? What does this look like in the future of customer success in the post-sale world? And that's what Kari's going to help us do today. So without further ado, Kari, I will hand it off to you.
Great. And let me share my screen. Can everyone see that okay? Cool.
Got it.
Perfect. So as Dave mentioned, I am Kari Ardalan. I'm head of digital and scale success at Qualtrics. And then today we're going to talk about unlocking digital success. So digital success, I know it's the hot new phrase, right? We are hearing it all over the place, but really is no longer a choice anymore. It is becoming a necessity. So digital success is the path to achieving both scale and profitability, which I know in the tech market is huge right now. And embracing digital is key to not just surviving in this market, but thriving in it. Now, I know it's easier said than done. I get all the time, people ask me, how do you get started, et cetera, especially depending on if you're a smaller company versus a larger company, et cetera. So that's kind of what we're going to focus on today. For startups, digital success is really the way to growth and competitiveness. It's more about laying a solid foundation that allows the startup to not just enter the market, but also make a significant impact and grow at scale. And then for growing companies, it's more about driving operational efficiencies and scalability. It's about streamlining processes, optimizing resources, and then ensuring that we're not just doing rapid growth anymore, but sustainable growth, which is especially important in this market. And then for established organizations, digital success is the path to becoming a market leader, and it's maintaining relevance in these evolving markets, which are evolving quickly. So today we're going to explore the strategies and insights I've learned at the last few companies I've been at, and hopefully pass down some tips and tricks of helping you get this started and navigating your digital journey. So when you get started on your journey of building a digital program, it's important to understand what are your objectives, what are the outcomes you're looking to achieve, and what metrics do you want to impact, right? Like you want to go into it with an opinion and what this is going to bring to your organization. So a lot of times it could be around boosting profitability and scale. It could be about expanding your reach, enhancing your customer experience, or driving product-led growth. Or it could be a mix of those things, right? And then you want to consider the role your program plays in enhancing your corporate metrics. So a lot of these are lagging, but could be around retention and expansion, your customer experience metrics, reducing cost to serve, or improving your overall healthy customer metric. At Qualtrics, we are focused on the following. So the first is scalability and profitability. Like others, we can no longer throw headcount at our challenges. So we really had to invest in creating a digital-only tier. We did have to double some of our CS books, and we wanted to do that all while improving retention and expansion, improving it, not just maintaining it, not seeing a dip, but improving it. So it was a strong challenge there. And then Qualtrics itself is an experience management company. So we're very, very focused on our customer experience, and we are committed to improving NPS, specifically around ease of use of the product and then ease of doing business with us. And then lastly, we wanted to improve organic adoption for our product and move our customers along the maturity curve. We are very focused on like the percentage of our customers that are deemed a healthy customer, and we continually want to push customers into that tier. So once you have that, you want to assess your company's readiness to go digital. This stage really helps you identify your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Digital is changing and quite rapidly. And so you need to understand what are the tools and investments that you need to get there and to do it right. So first, you want to look at your customer and understand what is your target segment and what customer journeys are you aiming to support. And then when you think about your product or service, you really want to understand how intuitive is it? Is it user-friendly, or is it much more complex? Does it traditionally have high-touch service motions and that type of stuff? And then the third area is operations. You are going to become best friends with operations, right? You have to understand what are the investments and resources required to digitize things, and then how doing that digitization will impact your internal processes. So like as you start to automate things, you're going to get data and it's going to change your internal processes within the company. And you need to partner with your operations team to understand how that's going to work and what it's going to be. And then the bottom one is around sponsorship and alignment. So this is really about assessing whether you have the necessary go-to-market alignment and sponsorship from e-staff, especially across sales, customer success, product, and marketing. So it's one thing just to build digital motions, right? But if your frontline teams or your go-to-market teams aren't helping to push customers there, then you're going to be challenged on adoption and you may not see the return on investment you're looking for. So you really want to be all in on it. And you want everyone to be like, hooray, we're going to do digital, right? And then digital is not just an email series anymore. It's actually maturing and quite quickly. So it does require an investment, and you want to be clear on what your strategy is and how you want to get there and make sure you're communicating that to stakeholders.
Kari, can I pause for a first question here?
Yeah.
So digital might be a term that's thrown around maybe from the leadership team, from the boardroom. Hey, we need to deploy digital success. What do you find are the most common misconceptions? I think you mentioned one, it's not just email, but what are other common misconceptions that folks on the call can help others in the company understand about what digital success is?
Yeah, a lot of the misconceptions are, one, it's that email journey. Two, it's we're going to give it to a CSM and they're going to build this complex digital journey, right? Like what I'm hearing all the time, it's very, very hard to hire for my type of role. Like you could look for marketing folks or you could look for frontline folks, but it's hard to find people that understand customers and marketing. And then the other component too is a lot of people confuse digital and scale. They sometimes aren't the same thing. There are digital motions in scale, but digital is now kind of breaking out into its own category, and it's not just about like scaling operations.
Thank you.
So I think now we are going to get into how we think about our target planning. And so with that, you really want to understand who are your targets, how are you going to keep them engaged, and you want to know what are the segments you're going to focus on, who are the personas, what are the key moments that they're going to engage with your brand, and then what channels. So when you're thinking segmentation, this is what service does your company provide from the long tail all the way to high touch, and what are the biggest pain points. There are some companies that are very high touch in nature just due to their product, and then there are some that are much simpler and out of the box. The good news is it doesn't matter what nature of product and services you provide, you can add digital experiences to both. It's just different motions depending on what that is. And then within the segmentation, you want to think about who are your personas. So are you targeting admins, users, decision makers, et cetera, and what are their pain points and goals? And then next, you want to map out the journey each of those personas might take from purchase to renewal and beyond. And what are the pivotal moments within that experience? And then lastly, you want to think about all the channels that you have and take stock of those and what you might need to invest in to really get your digital program going. So digging a bit into segmentation, when it comes to allocating your resources and efforts, it's important to determine which customer segment will yield the largest impact. So traditionally, a lot of companies start with the long tail first, right? And those customers may not individually bring in substantial revenue, but when you put them in aggregate, they actually contribute quite significantly. So this approach is really about maximizing efficiency and profitability in a digital first motion. You're starting to see companies as well eke that up into mid-market. So with this group, you're looking to enhance scale and profitability. So you're trying to see how can you throttle book sizes by automating repeatable tasks of your frontline teams and self-serving low-hanging fruit. And then more recently, you're seeing companies talk about doing digital for the entire customer base. And this is really about improving your offerings and self-service to benefit everyone. So ultimately, your choice depends on your business goals and the resources you have, as well as the potential impact that segment can have on where you should focus first. So to the right, I've given ways we have thought about it and how you can engage digitally no matter what your choice is. Qualtrics is going all in, so we are focusing on all customer segments and offering digital and self-service in new ways. So if you think about the long tail first, again, this is the more traditional approach. This is our scale book. We do have a portion of that that is purely digital only. And here our customers self-serve almost everything. And then we have a frontline team on the back end that serves as our last line of defense. In the mid-market book, this is where we might have like one CSM to 30 or 40 accounts. And in this segment, we use email and in-product as push channels to pull our customers into destinations like the product or our self-serve portal. And in that portal, they can onboard, they can train, they can access resources, manage their instance updates, and submit tickets all in one place. Within that segment, we have rolled out a pooled model as well. So we use that self-serve portal as an intake for customers to get access to the CSM or specialist that they need. So it just helps drive additional traffic there as well. And then in the covered book, we have very large account teams, right? Almost like a specialist model. We have AEs, we have a CSM, we have a TAM, we have a CSA, you name it. It's heavy account teams there. But that book is also services heavy, right? And we have an option for monetized success packages. So digitally engaging with this book looks a little differently because they do have such a large account team to help them on a one-to-one basis. But we do still want to allow them to self-serve. So ways that we bring them into our portal is we allow them to self-serve their services package. So if they buy a monetized success package, they can go in, fill out an intake form and request a TAM, office hours, consulting hours, etc. And then while they're in that portal, they can organically navigate through all the other resources we have for the other segments.
Kari, we do have a question from the audience here, and I think it's really pertinent. Yeah. Someone is asking, self-serve, great. What would be your suggestion to assess self-serve readiness? Because that's not just a customer success question, that's also a product technology question.
Yeah, so self-serve can be done in a few ways. I will say probably the cheapest route that I've seen so far is if you have a community or a knowledge base. Many communities are moving more into this self-serve portal model. And so you can start to test it there, where like you can start to track how many people are coming in, monthly active customers in there, et cetera, and what types of things they're engaging with. And then you can start to roll out more or make heavier investments in a true self-service portal.
Got it. And then there's also a follow-up here. I think people are looking to compare notes, at least in your experience in the scale model. What do you see as kind of a ratio of CSM to accounts? I'm sure it varies widely.
It does vary. I will say like previous companies has been more of a 1 to 200 ratio. Because we're going so heavily in on digital at Qualtrics, we're pushing more 1 to 300, 400 ratio.
Thank you.
So I know like Qualtrics is going all in, right? But if you are a startup or a smaller company, like I said, you can start with the long tail first. You can see how that works, creep up into the mid-market, even the covered book, and you can accomplish a lot of these motions through one-to-many, emails, and a community, like I mentioned before, and achieve some of the same goals and test the model. So we'll talk through that in greater detail throughout this.
Kari, can I ask one question here? You mentioned maybe partnering with marketing. So when it comes to actually implementing some of these things, the emails, the in-product pushes,
yeah.
What would you recommend to teams? Like a lot of this is kind of customer marketing. CSMs might have the muscle there, some might. Are you partnering with marketing orgs? Who are you partnering with on the polish side of things?
Yeah, so I've done it a few ways. At some companies, I've been more of like a singular stakeholder that goes around and builds like councils based on what we're looking to do, like a marketing council. And what we do is we say, here's all the events we're having, here's all the campaigns we're having. And I don't want to compete with those. I just want to enhance with them. So like they might have more of like a sales product push. I take a value play. and we almost do like a drip campaign to coordinate those efforts. I will say at Qualtrics, I'm lucky to own quite a bit. I own community, as well as like a digital lifecycle team and the scale frontline. So I get to design and orchestrate a lot of that myself. But I've seen it work both ways.
Very cool. Good suggestion.
Now, once you have your segment that you're focusing in, you want to say, what's the persona we're going to target, right? And you want to outline the personas within that segment. So if you're talking more of a long tail, smaller company, it might just be the admins. If you're doing all up customer base, you're going to have more than one persona. Now, traditionally, when engaging in digital CS, we have spammed admins. It's like admins, admins, admins. And I'm sure they're getting tons of emails from all of us. But you're starting to see B2B companies take a more of a B2C approach and engage with users. So if you think of like your iPhone, you probably get notifications all the time prompting you to engage with an app that you maybe haven't used in a while. We are taking the same approach. We are trying to understand who you are as a user. How can we get you to come back to the product, launch a new project or survey, and start engaging in a healthy manner? So we see users at the top of the funnel, and if we can get users organically adopting, then it's just going to ease the job of admins as well as influencers and decision makers. Obviously, you don't want to like neglect the admin. You do want to communicate them, but you don't want to spam them, right? You want to feed them. Here are the resources that you need to make your job easier. Here's the toolkits, all the training, rollout kits, and self-service options that are available to you to make your job easier. And then beyond admins, you have influencers, and influencers are likely on a career trajectory. So here you want to feed them with thought leadership, but you also want to pair it with execution of how are they going to accomplish the big projects on their plate. So luckily at Qualtrics, we have our XM Institute. It's full of thought leadership and content. And we use a GPT-powered portal and chatbot to help us pair that with support articles on how they would then go execute on that vision. If you don't have that, you can accomplish it through newsletters. We also run events where we have different cohorts of peer-to-peer customers chatting about some of these outcomes they're chasing and best practice to do so. And then lastly, you have decision makers. So at a lot of companies, it's starting to become rare to have them at the table. Like I'm sure they get invited to a million executive business reviews or quarterly business reviews. And so you can engage with them as well in a digital fashion. And we're starting to see the emergence of digital business reviews or executive summaries, digital value calculators to help say, hey, here's the value and the justification of your spend, and here's all the great things we're bringing to you. But you also want to feed them thought leadership, content, as well as networking events. And then once you have your segment and persona, you have to define what journey are we taking them on. Now, journeys can become very convoluted and complex. I know I made it super easy here on this slide, so just bear with me. But when you're engaging with your customers, you do need to understand the pivotal moments in the journey that you can digitize. So a lot of times I like to start on the tail ends with onboarding and renewals. Onboarding is important because it's how you start your customer on the digital foot. It's much harder to retrain a customer that's talked to humans their whole time with you to then go self-serve than it is to get someone started digitally. So you really want to think about that when you're rolling out these programs, because you want to teach them immediately how to self-serve and use those resources that are available. And then onboarding itself has a lot of repeatable tasks and actions that are a little bit easier to automate, especially if you're thinking of like the long tail. You want them to have quick time to value. You want to scale that out as much as you can. So it's a good one to target in the journey. Renewals is another one. Renewals is very administrative and transactional. So you have things like, I want to see my license details. I want to see my contract. Who are the billing contacts? What's the PO? Some people are going even full on e-commerce. But renewals can really ruin your customer experience if you don't do it right, because there's so much of that back and forth that why not make that process easier, right? And why not automate it so that you can make that a great experience and focus on the strategic conversations you need to have to mitigate churn or push an expansion. And then adoption, it gets meatier, right? Like you've got customers from like 1 year to maybe 10 years. You might have multiple product lines. So sometimes it's really hard to know where to get started when you're thinking of your adoption journey. And I posted it in this next slide, but like what I like to do is really focus on the health score. This is where a health score is key, or even a white space score, but it's really understanding, okay, I'm gonna target this segment. So let's say I'm gonna go target the long tail of the business. I would then take that health score and run load balancing to determine what is plaguing this group. I will tell you 9 times out of 10, when I look at the long tail or even the middle of the business, it is the basics. It's usually things like lower monthly active users and lower adoption of basic features. And what's funny is every company I've done this at, like especially marketing, they're like, oh, go push this flashy feature we just created. But it's really tough to get a customer who's barely using your product to go turn on a flashy feature. Like that's probably an outlier. So you want to use that health score to solve for the 80% and say, how do we get these folks adopting the basics and then push them up the maturity curve and introduce the flashy features? So that's how we think a little bit more about the adoption phase, to know where do we focus on first. So once you have that, you then want to think about the channels that exist today. You might have some already. You may need to invest in some that you may not have, but you don't want to go blow your whole budget. So you do want to think about it pretty strategically. So for startups, you should focus on more cost-effective channels. Traditionally, that can be like an email orchestration tool and a community or knowledge base. For growing companies, this is more of an omni-channel approach. So in-product widgets, you could mirror that with email if customers get stalled or unengaged. And then you could pull them into a community or a static self-serve resource to help pump out journeys there as well. And then for established, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, Kari, do have a question here. Kind of, I think some folks are interested in kind of the mix in the journey of self-serve onboarding versus traditional onboarding. Someone is asking, when it comes to service contracts, what have you seen to support the self-service renewal process? Any thoughts around self-service renewal or how those are baked into contracts and things like that?
Yeah, we haven't necessarily baked them into our contracts because we're just getting started on e-commerce. But we are allowing customers to like have a choice, right? Like when we're planning it out, we're not targeting a certain ARR. We ourselves spend money more than 25K a year through digital channels. So you have to, it's kind of like the Carvana approach. You need to understand how your customers like to engage and what's the preference for them. And then when you're thinking of self-serve renewals, you can do a lot of out of the box plays and gamification for like upgrades and downgrades. Because a lot of people fear self-serving that customers are just gonna start churning and not talk to anyone. But there's a lot of stopgaps you can build in, and then gamification you can build in to do the same things that almost a human could do.
Very cool. And might I add, we did a poll here of what, in the audience, does your product have self-serve onboarding? The majority said no. I think there are some low barrier efforts, at least from what we've seen in our experience and my experience of using products. You may not have a full self-serve engine, or your product may not be fully enabled, but one thing you might do to help in that scale effort, we see a lot of companies these days do hey, every Tuesday and Thursday, we do an onboarding session for all of our new customers who have joined in the last 2 weeks. We want to make sure you're invited to that. So there can be a little bit more of a content-based approach, or I guess a pooled-based approach for all new customers, maybe who have bought the solution, join our one-to-many webinar of onboarding and assistance. Have you seen that come into these models as well?
Yeah, and I can show you at the end here like how we put it into practice. We do more of a multi-channel approach, but I've seen like onboarding office hours, a static onboarding webinar. At Workday, we put folks into onboarding cohorts where we had like 20 companies going through training all together, and then we put them on a community where they could peer-to-peer collaborate on that training and help each other out. And they had projects and stuff that they submitted to get the certifications. And then you can have in-product guides and walkthroughs, as well as, again, that self-service portal where customers come in and get dynamic content through like a GPT-powered chatbot. So there's a multitude of ways that you can do it.
Yeah, and one follow-up there is, okay, so there are a portion of self-service, portions of your tool. When it comes to creating success plans, do those still exist for a classic self-serve customer, or maybe a mix of that customer? And how do you bake in that self-service customer to the success plans on the team?
Yeah. So how we did it, the good news is I own the scale front line. So we started with just humans starting to track, like, what are the outcomes you're looking to achieve? And we wanted 1 to 2 outcomes per customer. Then what we started to do was take that information from our CRM and run text analysis on it and say, okay, what are the outcome buckets? And then how do we start to digitally self-serve this? So now customers can come in and we have this concept of my profile where they enter in their use case and then their outcomes. And we continually ask that on a rolling basis so that we can aggregate those outcomes in mass and then start to track whether they're achieving those. And then you can start to do like digital communications of like, we helped you achieve XYZ with our product.
And are those outcomes generally in product outcomes, or are they both like customer goal outcomes, or the answer?
More value drivers for the customer. We want to enhance our NPS score. And so our CSM will get it, give them thought leadership, features they may not be using to help them do that, and then we'll track the success of it.
Okay.
And then you're even seeing with the GPT powered bots, they can write in an outcome and it will spit out like, here's the things you're not using, et cetera, or the trainings you need to take. So it's maturing quite quickly, I'll say. Back to channels, I will say established companies should be more of a multi-channel approach. So this becomes multiple entry points into journeys in the customer's desired channel. So like, I don't care if they onboard over email, in product, or in our self-serve portal. I do care that they're hitting the milestones for success, but we give customers a way to do it in their desired channel. So for us at Qualtrics, we are using all the above. We do orchestrate how the channels work together, especially with like push channels, because we don't want to be spamming our customers. But we do want to provide scale, deflection, and self-service. And so we heavily govern this process. So like, we don't use email as spam. It has to be a clear value-based messaging. In product has to help them do their job in that moment, or the pop-ups will impact the way they view their product. So you really have to think about it thoughtfully. Please, please don't let channels or don't let teams abuse these channels, because they'll turn you off pretty quickly if you're not thoughtful about it. So once you have all that, you wanted to define how the channels work together. And like I was mentioning before, traditionally digital was like push notifications after push notification, and it felt like a lot of noise, especially if you consider like how SDRs, marketing, frontline teams are all emailing your customers as well. It's a ton of noise. And so we are taking more of a modified approach where if we have to do a push to get you into a destination, we will do it, or we'll try and pull you from like in the product itself or other places. But once you're in our destination, we will then take you on a defined dynamic journey to complete a task, and that will be in our self-serve portal. Another thing I want to mention there is like, email journeys are very hard to configure if you think about the contacts and then the layers and the if-thens. But configuring these in a community or a portal is actually much easier and more dynamic, especially if you're thinking of AI coming in, et cetera. We are able to pump out more journeys at scale and in a shorter amount of time by using that technology than a traditional email journey. But we do use email in certain situations. So like, if they're not using the product, we have to use email, right? Because they're not in our product, we can't message them there. And then we will use email if they start to get stalled or they stop engaging with the product itself or our digital portal. If all else fails, we do have our frontline teams. So we have defined certain milestones of what we're looking to track. And then if a customer's not hitting that or hits a risk milestone, we will send it to the frontline team to go get the customer re-engaged and back on track. And then before I get to what this looks like in practice, a lot of people say, hey, how do you measure success for digital? And I hear this all the time. It's like really tough to know what are the metrics to be tracking on a regular basis. So at Qualtrics, we look at them in 3 buckets. We look at reach, and then we look at quality, and then we look at impact. So impact is more of lagging, right? Like, you can't just look at the lagging indicators because you won't know if you're doing well for like 12 months time, right? Until a renewal comes up. So you do want to look more for leading. So if you're considering reach, it's like total touched by ARR or percentage. If you're thinking email, it's what are your open rates? If you have a community or a self-serve portal, we look at monthly active customer. And our goal is to get 80% of our customer base actively using these self-service tools, because then it's less noise that we have to push on them. Then when you're thinking about quality, it's how good is the content or the call to action that we're sending the customer? Are they completing their goals effectively? So if you have trouble measuring like feature uptake rates, you could look at email click-through rates, or if they're in a portal, we measure what we call goal completion. So what did they click on? Did they hit onboarding milestones? Did they self-service that goal completely themselves? And we'll start to measure who does that with no touch. And then lastly, when you're thinking about impact, that's impact on your health score, retention and expansion metrics, and then FTE savings and deflections as well.
Kari, on the health score piece, do you recommend creating a separate health score for the onboarding and activation side apart from the account health score? Do you blend those? What's the best practice there?
So we have one primary health score because we didn't want to drown our frontline in a multitude of scoring. But we do have our own set of onboarding milestones that my team tracks internally. So we will alert the frontline if a customer's not hitting them appropriately, but they don't need to track it themselves in a health score.
Okay, cool.
So I know we had a lot of questions of like, what does this look like in practice? So I've simplified kind of how we do both onboarding, renewals, and adoption. For onboarding, we do have a trigger of a new license and user was added. So we will then send them a welcome email based on who they are, right? If they're an admin or a user, et cetera. And then that email directs them to our self-serve portal where they can start to onboard, get training, et cetera. So that portal, most recently, we started with static checklists, which was tough to maintain and didn't hit the mark with everyone. More recently, we moved to a GPT-powered portal where we will look at product line, job title, different user attributes, and then we'll match them to content to help them complete onboarding. So what it does is it spits out these dynamic checklists that says, here's all the things you need to do in the product to get started with your project. Here's all the trainings you should watch, and then here's all your self-serve resources. So we're starting to become more dynamic with that over time so that we can be more personalized and hit the mark. Like I mentioned, we do still track onboarding milestones, and if those continue to be missed, it then goes to our frontline teams to intervene and get them back in the journey. Next is renewals. So like I mentioned, renewals is super transactional. It can be full of awkward conversations. So why not self-serve some of those, right? And make that a good experience. So with renewals, we do start by sending a renewal notification, and that directs them to the hub. So we say, hey, your renewal's coming up in a few months. They can go view their license details. We're working on getting utilization in there. We're also getting our value calculators in there and our contracts. So when they go to make that decision, they have everything in a one-stop shop to review their contract. And then while they're there, we want to gather things like who's the billing contact? Because a lot of times that's someone sitting in procurement who may not be in the product, right? But we need that information so that we can then route renewal notifications to that person. We will also gather intent to renew and try and route that to the appropriate teams to mitigate risk or push an expansion or upgrade, depending on the response. And then we'll also collect their PO. So what this does is it allows us to gather that information self-service, and then we're able to automate a lot of the things on the back end, like auto quote and auto invoice.
I love this slide here, Kari, if I may. Renewals, if a customer is doing well, is often just the customer wanting to give us more money, and we've made it so hard at times to make that possible. And there's a contract, and there's a meeting, and there's a business review. And at times we do get scared of leaving it purely to a digital motion to renew. You mentioned intent to renew. Can you dive in on that? What are you tracking as far as intent to renew? Is that a customer signal? Is that usage signal? Is that them saying, hey, it's in 90 days. We think we're going to renew? Talk a little bit about that.
We actually asked them, and we asked them a few times. So like our NPS survey says, like, if you were to renew, if we were to put renewal paperwork in front of you today, would you renew? Our frontline teams will also check in on it and give kind of their sentiment around renewal. And then we will ask 4 months to renewal, hey, your renewal's coming up. And it's almost like a survey option. So like, yes, I want to explore upgrade options. No, we need, like, it's not explicitly written like that, but like, we want to downgrade, et cetera. And then we will route them to the appropriate person. But if it's like green, yes, straight renewal, we'll just send it to renewals. If there's a risk there, then we'll send it to a frontline team to mitigate that risk.
Awesome, thanks.
We are future state looking at full on e-commerce. And again, this doesn't necessarily have to be the long tail. Many customers are spending quite a bit monthly and they're doing it digitally. So with e-commerce, you can set up a storefront. They can again come in and select kind of the different things they want to buy. It does help with small package upgrades. And then you can build in things like approved downgrade and swap plays, upsell gamification. It's a great place to gather like renewal trends, especially if someone's leaving. You can build in your churn survey within that itself to figure out what's going on there.
Can you give some examples of gamification? I've heard you mention that a couple of times. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so when I was at Box, we would say like, hey, if you buy 5 more seats, we'll give you X% more in storage. So you might swap like a freebie feature if they add in more seats or more responses or something like that. And it's just to allow them to test out like the next level suite package.
Some incentives. Okay, cool.
And then this is one of our adoption journeys. Again, we looked at the health score for the long tail, and it was, again, the basics that were plaguing that segment. So we decided to start with very simple approaches. So we did user no login in the last 90 days. User hasn't created a project in the last 120 days, and the users are not collecting responses. So we are more of a survey tool. If you're not doing those things, you're definitely not using the basics, right? And that's a massive risk. So in our campaigns, because they were not in the product, we did have to take an email as a nudge to give them a call to action to come back to the product. So if it's like user no projects, well, again, we are working on comprehensive data around our users to give them prompts for like, hey, based on your industry or your job title, did you know you could do X, Y, and Z to get them back in the product and using it. We will then track engagement to those. And if we don't see any after 120 days, then we will send it to our frontline to do more of an outreach to see what's going on with the customer. Our goal here is to see how we can move users up the maturity curve again and start to bring in additional features through our digital channels to make sure that they're adopting in a healthy fashion. And that's kind of everything, but we definitely have time for questions if there's more questions from folks.
This has been awesome, Kari. I'm even taking my own notes. Yeah, here in the final minute or two, if you do have a question, please pop it into the Q&A. But this has been very helpful. One of the things that came to mind, one of my own questions is, larger companies probably have the pipes on the back end set up to be able to track those activation metrics, product metrics. In your experience, is that if a team is still trying to figure that out, any suggestions on how to partner with the product and engineering team to make sure we're surfacing those usage metrics correctly to those in the digital scale side of things?
Yeah, you would think larger companies had it under control, but they do not. It's the same problem even at smaller companies. But like what we did find is a lot of companies I worked for, they didn't necessarily build the product in a way to track adoption. So you do want to make sure that product is somehow incentivized on that. Like you don't want to build all these features that aren't being adopted. And so we oftentimes talk to product leaders, and they don't just have like KPIs around new feature releases, but like who's adopting them and is the market really taking to them. So that's the biggest partnership. And if that's one of their KPIs, and ultimately they're going to build it and measure it the same way we would in post sales.
I love that. Yeah, KPI on the product side tied to everything. Another question, this is kind of a high level, but in digital versus human in the loop, any of critical over your years, critical must-dos or do avoid, you should likely avoid these types of things in your experience where it's like, stay away over here and make sure you always focus over here?
I mean, I've said it a million times, stay away from spam, like especially Gmail, everyone's coming out with spam blockers. It's going to ruin the experience. Like if you don't have a clear message or a call to action, don't send it. Every company is thinking about this and doing it in new ways. So I would be very thoughtful about it. And then I will say, if you don't have all the data on the back end, you can feign personalization. And it's a lot easier these days with chatbots too. Like it's just about asking the customers the right questions to then give them a customized view of your resources. So don't think you need to have all the data on the back end or even be able to store the data on the user in the back end. Sometimes you can feign that personalization through like a bot interaction.
Awesome. Yeah, I love some of your suggestions around GPT enabled support and success. That's been fantastic. Another question. Yes, just a reminder, folks, we will send this recording out. We will post it to our resources. You will get an email with a link to this recording and can see this wonderful content. Well, Kari, I think that'll do it for us. We've had really great participation. This has been very amazing content for us and something very top of mind. Thank you, everybody, for participating. Do look for an email, check back on our resources page, sign up for the rest of our webinars. And we appreciate your time, Kari. So we will go ahead and end there.
Thanks. Bye.
All right. See you, everybody.